Welcome back. You're watching Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Carol Lahara. I want to start my time at the desk with bringing some big breaking news from over the weekend, actually. Take a look at this, a tweet from the Los Angeles Times here saying Claudia Sheinbaum, a U.S.-educated scientist turned politician, was elected Sunday as Mexico's first female president, shattering gender barriers in a country known for a culture of machismo and high rates of violence against women. I want to get a full breakdown on this historic decision from Fox News correspondent William Lajeunesse.
¡Viva México!
For the first time in its 200-year history, Mexico elected a woman as president. A former mayor of Mexico City and climate scientist trained at UC Berkeley, Claudia Sheinbaum is the protege of the current president and vowed to continue his policies.
We will govern for everyone, men and women, but we will first take care of the poor. We will be austere and corruption won't come back.
But for the U.S., it's about two things, trade and immigration. Officials here will watch closely to see if Mexico reduces its flow of migrants, with a likely member of her cabinet suggesting Mexico needs to do a better job of controlling its southern border.
Mexico, probably more than any other country, can either undermine or strengthen the U.S.'s border and migration policy.
Sheinbaum may also take a harder stance on human trafficking and the drug cartels than her predecessor, whose hugs not bullets policy pushed homicides near record levels. Sheinbaum has the mandate to do it, getting almost 60% of the vote, twice the support of her nearest competitor.
I see a Mexico with a lot of pain and violence. I wished her that she can solve the great problems of our people.
Sheinbaum also becomes the first Mexican president of Jewish descent. Her grandparents were immigrants from Eastern Europe. In Los Angeles, William Lajeunesse, Fox News.
Thank you to William Lajeunesse for that report, but I want to dive into this topic a little further. So next, I'd like to bring into the conversation Gustavo Flores Macias. He's a political professor at Cornell University, also an expert on Latin American politics. Gustavo, good to have you. Nice to meet you. And I'd like you to start by just maybe continuing to talk about the historical significance of this decision.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. This is truly an historic election in the sense that it's the first time that a female president is elected in Mexico. Mexico is a country with a fairly macho culture, so this came as a surprise to many. Certainly, once the two main candidates for the two main coalitions were decided, then it became clear that a woman was going to be elected president. But, it wasn't until 1953 that women gained the right to vote in Mexico. So this is a long time in the making and a very welcome development, certainly. I think what we'll see is that in her presidency, there will definitely be sort of this feminist aspect to her policies, even though we will also see a lot of continuity with the current administration's policies.
It's really just unbelievable how you mentioned that it wasn't until 1953 that women were allowed to even vote in Mexico. So maybe let's get into more in detail on the shift that you've seen these past few years that made this a prime time to have a female as president in that country.
Absolutely. There has been a lot of progress in Mexico in this sense. We've seen institutional changes, even a number of seats and candidates that have to be female that have to be put forth by the different parties. And this has certainly contributed to women gaining ground in terms of political positions across all levels, at the local level, in the legislature, in the cabinet. This administration that is coming to an end, the administration of President López Obrador, made a point to really have a good number of women in top positions in the cabinet. So about half of it were women. And we're likely to see something similar, if not even more, more female presence in the cabinet with President Sheinbaum coming up.
Just showing here some of the footage from last night over in Mexico. You see there, she is celebrating this historic moment as she becomes that first female president-elect. So let's continue with this conversation by giving us a bit more background on who Claudia Sheinbaum even is and what was it about her that appealed so much to voters?
Yes, absolutely. So the last position that she held, the last office, was the mayorship of Mexico City. And this is, by most accounts, the second most important political position in Mexico. Mexico City is a fairly large city. There are about 8 to 10 million people within strictly Mexico City, but the metropolitan area reaches about 20 million people. Now, as you can imagine, governing a city of 8 to 10 million people is really difficult. And there's a sense, clearly the results show that Mexicans thought she had done a good job in Mexico City. And she had been very close to the current president, to President López Obrador, a very, very loyal supporter, not only from this administration, but even back in the day when he himself was the mayor of Mexico City. She was part of his cabinet, and clearly someone who can give continuity to this project that about 60% of voters have supported on Sunday. We will see a lot of continuity in projects that have to do with social programs for the poor. Minimum wages have increased considerably over the last six years. There's an economic nationalism that we will expect to see as well in the coming years. And certainly managing the U.S.-Mexico relationship will be a major challenge for Claudia Sheinbaum as well.
See, Gustavo, so that's a perfect way to kind of segue to this final point and question that I have for you, which is what are some of the challenges that Sheinbaum is going to have heading into her term? Of course, right now, one of the big things in the U.S. is the situation at the border. And then in Mexico specifically, you have a big drug cartel problem as well. So how does she plan to handle that? Has she addressed any of those concerns? How is she making sure that people are confident in how she's going to lead?
The number one problem for Mexicans today is public safety. And this is certainly something that, has to be the priority for the next administration. It is true that within this administration, the levels of violent crime remain fairly high, but we've seen a declining trend since this administration began about 6 years ago. So President Sheinbaum is expected to continue with this declining trend, but Mexicans need for this trend to decline much faster than it has over the last 6 years. So that will be number one on the agenda. Claudia Sheinbaum's team had done a good job by most accounts in Mexico City when it comes to public safety. And it's very possible that the person who was the public safety secretary in Mexico City would become the public safety secretary at the national level as soon as she takes office. So we should expect to see some results on this front, but it'll be interesting to see whether there is a real change in the policy over the since 2006. So it's been several administrations now that have adopted this policy of involving the military, heavy military presence in law enforcement. And this is unlikely to change, but what we might see under Claudia Sheinbaum's administration is sort of a softer side, perhaps making more emphasis on civilian law enforcement, on professionalizing the police, and investing in the judiciary, which will be really important.
And then, Gustavo, I am going to give you one final thought here. Anything that you think our viewers need to know about this historic election in Mexico? Maybe something we didn't touch on.
Absolutely. We have a key moment. We have an election in November in the U.S., and now we know who the president will be in Mexico. The bilateral relationship is a tricky one, and depending on who wins in November, Claudia Sheinbaum will have to navigate that relationship. One key moment in the relationship has to do with what was NAFTA before, now the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, that will be up for renegotiation or reevaluation and potentially renegotiation. And that's something that we should keep our eyes on, because that's an area that, even though it's not strictly immigration, it's not strictly public safety, it can serve as an area that can give a lot of leverage to affect change when it comes to immigration policy, when it comes to public safety. So we'll see how that works out. It really will depend on who wins the election in November, but we should expect Claudia Sheinbaum on the Mexican side to be fairly pragmatic.
So much still to look forward to. Gustavo Flores Macias, professor of politics over at Cornell University. We appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox and your expertise. We'll be sure to speak with you again soon as we follow Sheinbaum throughout her term.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I do want to give everybody just a look at some of the reaction because, again, big moment over in Mexico. Take a look at this, a tweet from our Vice President Kamala Harris saying, "Congratulations to President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico on your historic victory. I am looking forward to working with you to further strengthen the U.S.-Mexico partnership, from economic growth and national security to addressing the root causes of migration." And then we also have more reaction here from Justin Trudeau saying, "Congratulations to Mexico's President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum on a historic win. Our free trade agreement is the envy of the world and the result of a strong, mutually beneficial relationship." It goes on to say, "I look forward to strengthening that relationship with you to create more prosperity for Canadians and Mexicans alike." And then we do have a readout from President Biden and a conversation that he had with the president-elect. To take a look at this. Here from the White House, it says, "President Joe Biden called President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico today to congratulate her on her historic electoral victory to become the next president of Mexico. The president also expressed his congratulations to the Mexican people for the success of their free and fair electoral process. The two leaders emphasized their commitment to continuing the strong and collaborative partnership that will advance democracy, security, and prosperity in both countries."